2021 is promising to be a huge year for driver assistance tech in the US. Not only are we going to see Super Cruise expanding to other products outside the Cadillac lineup, but we're also going to be seeing a hands-off-the-wheel semi-autonomous driving system from Ford, one coming soon from Jeep, and then of course there's the continual rollout of the beta program of Tesla's full self-driving suite. But today we're going to be talking about the most interesting of those that you can actually buy today, and that is the Cadillac Super Cruise system. If you want a vehicle that will drive itself down the road for hours and hours with your hands nowhere near the steering wheel, the Escalade is quite simply the only option in North America right now. Now, a little bit later in 2021, the CT4 and CT5 will be getting this, and then also the new Chevy Bolt and of course the GMC Sierra at some point soon are going to be getting this tech, expanding to 22 models in the GM lineup by 2023. This system is very different than Tesla's AutoPilot, but quite similar to what we see upcoming in the Ford and the Jeep lineup. So without further ado, let's get out on the road. There's some key differences between Super Cruise and the system that has sucked all the air out of the room when it comes to semi-autonomous driving, Tesla's AutoPilot system. Two key differences you should know about. First up, AutoPilot is not a hands-off-the-wheel system. You are supposed to keep your hands on the wheel, and because you're supposed to keep your hands on the wheel, Tesla has had to add some driver monitoring features, but they don't have driver monitoring features the same way we see in Super Cruise. It's just looking for tugging and effort on the steering wheel, basically some resistance to what the car is doing. This system is quite different. On one of these camera feeds, you can see some little lights blinking on the steering wheel, and then this little sensor right here just below the speedometer, just above the airbag. Those are there in order to monitor my eye movements, because Super Cruise is monitoring the driver's attention on the road. It's making sure that you're actually looking at the road. With AutoPilot, it's not making sure you're paying attention at all. Now, that enables the truly hands-off-the-wheel system in this vehicle. Tesla is using the same basic logic that we see in other steering assistance systems, where it's looking for resistance on the steering wheel just to continue that lane-keeping function. Of course, Tesla goes to the next step by using a lot of camera inputs to try and determine what's going on the road, and then activate the steering to keep you in your lane, change lanes, etc. The Tesla system will operate theoretically on any roadway that the system can read enough of the lane markings and surroundings in order to operate. Super Cruise, on the other hand, depends on LiDAR maps. Now, the system does not have a LiDAR on board the vehicle. Instead, it's depending on an already established library of maps that General Motors has created for a ton of roadways across the US. At this point in time, pretty much all the major freeways and expressways around the US have been Super Cruise mapped, including the freeway that I'm on right here. So let's go ahead and attempt this system. So let's go ahead and first set the cruise control here. The LiDAR maps give this Escalade a better sense of what's going on around the outside of the SUV than we see simply in camera-based systems. So the LiDAR maps are a pretty detailed view of what's on the highway, how the lanes are arranged, the way the road curves, things that are around the road, so that way the vehicle can look for things, know exactly where it is. Then of course we have the driver monitoring system again, which is a key component of this system. I love the way the system's laid out. We have this green icon right here on the steering wheel. That means that the system is engaged. It will flash different colors based on the system's availability and whether or not it thinks you need to take over the system. As with AutoPilot, the system is capable of making lane changes for you. Right now it's looking for an opening, and now it's decided it's going to make that automatic lane change, completely unassisted. I just simply turn off the blinker, and then of course it knows that I'm done. The car will speed up or slow down to try and assist that lane change opening, but it does leave a pretty decent gap, I have to be pretty honest there. Because Cadillac would like you to remain in control of the vehicle, if you spend too much time looking away from the driver monitoring system, then it's going to tell you that you need to take over. You can look away for a reasonable amount of time. It's definitely longer in this generation of the system than before. You can see it's disengaged there because of lack of attention. It vibrated my seat and flashed the steering wheel red. But that's okay, I can simply re-engage the system. You'll notice the steering wheel blinked blue there because I was in the middle of changing lanes, but as soon as I was back in this lane, the system took back over. And now of course I'm going to engage another automatic lane change here as we get up to this intersection. Depending on the intersection, the system will maintain your position in the lane and take off ramps if that is what is required. So if you're in a situation like is going to come up here soon, where we're going to be going from Interstate 680 over to US 101, then the system will try and stay in this lane and then complete that maneuver through the interchange. Let's go ahead and see how that works here. Obviously, it slowed down because of the traffic in front of me. It seems to handle traffic diving in front of the vehicle a little bit better than the previous generation of Super Cruise. Cadillac says that they've refined the LiDAR maps and they've greatly expanded the LiDAR mapping for this particular generation. So now it's not just certain highways and certain freeways. It also expands out to, I guess, what you'd call A roads or B roads in other countries. So some of those more rural roadways, as long as access is limited, the system will function. So right here it says that it can't change lanes, probably because I'm in the middle of this intersection here. Let's see if it's able to do this here. So yep, it's taking this exit here, but it's not changing lanes on this ramp. Oh, it's decided to go ahead and change lanes on the ramp. It is a little bit freaky for the car to be doing a highway ramp like this. It's slowed down, I would say, appropriately for this, 55 miles an hour. I think the recommendation for this ramp is 40 miles per hour, but honestly, 55 is what everybody else does, so I'm perfectly comfortable with the car navigating at this speed. That's exactly what I would have done. Now, of course, we're accelerating up onto the next freeway. Let's see how it handles the traffic interaction that's going on up here. This is a little bit of a nightmare, honestly, during the day, so we'll see how the system works. With the first generation of Super Cruise, honestly, I spent hours and hours behind the wheel having it drive for me. It really is good at imitating the way a natural driver would drive. I think much better than AutoPilot, or the limited amount of time that I was able to spend in a very, very early beta of full self-driving in a Tesla Model Y. The big thing that I've noticed is that in a lot of Teslas, the steering wheel motions tend to be a little bit jerky, especially in some of the tighter corners. With this, thanks to the LiDAR mapping and the refinement and the polishing of those LiDAR maps that the vehicle has to help support what lane it's in and how the lanes operate with one another, it tends to be an awful lot smoother. Now, the vehicle tends to be a little bit cautious about changing lanes there. You can see I signaled, and the Tesla behind me that maybe was in full self-driving, maybe not, decided to just quickly change lanes right in front of me. The Cadillac hesitated a bit and then tried to veer back in its lane, but it was a little late. It already kind of upset that Tesla driver. Sorry. Oh, it's a Tesla employee. How about that? Sorry, testing Super Cruise here. You'll notice he has his hands on the wheel. Poor thing. How sad. Be sure and cut that out. Or we'll leave it in. Go ahead and leave it in. One thing that I've noticed that Super Cruise handles pretty well is a situation that just occurred back there where lanes are merging, and this lane is the one that continues and something else merges into it. This does a better job of staying in the lane rather than moving outside the confines of the lane as the previous generation system did. Oh, wow. It, however, did not handle someone trying to come into my lane a little bit too closely there, and that's probably why you still need to be paying attention to what the car is doing. That person wasn't signaling or anything, they just started crossing over the lane. The front of the car was right about here. So obviously you still need to be paying attention with any of these systems, and the driver monitoring system is part of that. But back to Super Cruise here. Interesting twists with this generation is that if the vehicle senses that there is a large vehicle on one side that perhaps is a little bit closer to your vehicle than it would like, it will actually move over a little bit in the lane. This system also will engage a little bit more easily. In the previous generation of Super Cruise, it really wanted you to be very, very central in the lane. And if simply the act of hitting the button on the steering wheel caused you to veer left or right a little bit, then the system would disable itself. And this system won't. Instead, it will recenter you and then continue with Super Cruise functionality. If you want to know more about Cadillac's new Escalade, be sure and hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be covering all the features of this vehicle in a separate video, including the augmented reality camera that we see right here. Now, construction sites are an important thing that we should cover. We just went through one right there. If the construction information is in the system as far as how to handle lane lines, then the system will drive through it, just like you saw there. And it does a really good job of recognizing the repainted lines in that situation and staying in the middle of the lane. If, however, it's a more of an ongoing situation and there are some documented lane changes and the LiDAR maps are not complete of the area, then the system will tell you that you need to take over. I'm taking a freeway exit here. As you can see, the system is still active. We're going around the corner here. I reduced speed myself because I didn't want the vehicle to have to do that. This is another limited access interchange, so it should just connect me with this next freeway and then continue right along. Oh, Super Cruise disengaging. You can see that the steering wheel flashed red there. I'm not exactly clear what the system was upset about, but we can go ahead and re-engage it here. Ah, there we go. The lane ended, that's why. So it recognized the fact that the carpool lane and the lane that I was in were merging, didn't know what to do about it, so it told me that I needed to take control over. The combination of the vibrating seat and the flashing steering wheel, I actually have to say that's a really good combination, and I think that's exactly why this has been mimicked in the new Ford and Jeep systems. It looks like it's going to be very much like Super Cruise, to be perfectly honest. Although logically Super Cruise works in urban and suburban highway settings like I'm driving on right here, this logically has its best potential in those long road trip situations. If you're going from the San Francisco Bay Area down to Los Angeles in California, for instance, or if you're crossing across pretty much anywhere in Texas, there are hundreds and hundreds of miles of absolutely nothing. And this really is very calming to be able to just stare at the road ahead and not have to interact with the steering wheel. You can do whatever you want. You can pop open a drink and, not worry about hands on the wheel, as long as you're actually paying attention to what's going on in front of you. And one interesting thing is that I actually find myself paying a little bit more attention to what's going on around me with Super Cruise on some of those longer highway trips when I've tried it than in a regular vehicle with adaptive cruise control, because regular vehicles and adaptive cruise control don't have facial monitors. They don't have those eye monitoring systems to make sure that you're actually paying attention to the road. So in those vehicles, it is a little bit easier to be careless and perhaps eat a burger and not pay quite as much attention to what's going on the road, start fiddling with buttons in the car. And in the Super Cruise enabled vehicle, you actually end up spending a little bit more time with your eyes on the road, to be pretty honest, because even just fiddling with some of the buttons over here to the left of the instrument cluster, the car can get a little upset and say that you're not paying enough attention, that you need to regain control. That's pretty much all you need to know about Cadillac's new Super Cruise system. I have to say, I'm really stoked that major manufacturers like General Motors and Ford and now Chrysler are going to be getting into this semi-autonomous hands-free driving game. Because to be perfectly honest, I trust them a little bit more with my safety than a manufacturer that likes bleeding edge or cutting edge technology. In my head, I think that General Motors has more of a healthy fear of litigation than Tesla does, and I think that we've seen that in some of the changes that have happened to Tesla's AutoPilot over time, where they were a little bit more aggressive in allowing AutoPilot to do its thing without any sort of driver monitoring, so you didn't have to tug on the steering wheel, you could just hop in the back seat if you wanted to, etc. And that's just not possible with this kind of system. Anyway, let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and of course, stay tuned for the full review of the new Escalade coming up soon.